Welcome to Solutionary Rail Stakeholder Perspectives. Tonight's guests are from Kansas City, Kansas. Kansas City is the nation's largest inland port and is deeply impacted by intermodal freight, that is to say, the movement of goods around the country on both trains and on trucks. Back in April, we spoke with Richard Mabian, who's also known as Kansas City's Green Czar, and tonight we continue this important conversation with two of Richard's esteemed colleagues. We will begin with Leticia DeCaigny. Leticia was born and raised in Kansas City and grew up in the neighborhood of Argentine, located next to the second largest rail yard in the United States. And thank you for joining us this evening. Would you explain how you got involved with groups confronting diesel health pollution, including the Diesel Health Project, which we know is now called Clean Air Now?
Sure. So basically it all started with just trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, just being, I had to find my identity, mainly because I had an unfortunate situation. My son was diagnosed with cancer and I became a full-time caregiver. So I had to focus on him and I had to stop working. And so that was for 5 years. Unfortunately, he passed away, and now it's been 5 years since he passed away. And when that happened, I didn't want to just work a 9-to-5 job like I was before. And I wanted to do something with more heart and a passion and purpose. And, through my journey of this whole cancer treatment, I learned a few things about nutrition and how that would help his health. Well, during that time, I was also speaking to somebody like a consultant about his health, and a lot of it had to do with the environment as well, and stress, just so many things. But environment, I thought, was really big and something that I had to focus on. And so I just happened to start going to some neighborhood meetings, and I got an email from our ED, and he said, "Hey, there's going to be an event at your community center with people coming in from different cities. You should come meet and greet them." And I had no idea why they were going. So when I went, that's when I realized that they were going on a toxic tour in my community. And that's where I met Eric and Richard. I didn't know them before. And it was a moving forward network convening. And in this 2-hour period, each region, so there were people from Houston, California, Florida, New York, New Jersey, they were talking about their pollutant impacts and their solutions. And at the end of that meeting, our ED asked, he said, I bet you if we went around and asked, what are the top 10 things you're concerned about in the community, nobody would even mention the railroad. And I was thinking to myself, probably not. Like, it's something that we're used to. Like, it's where I was born. I'm used to hearing the trains. They would rock me to sleep. So I just wouldn't think anything about it. And so at this meeting, I also learned that diesel was a carcinogen. And I couldn't just do nothing about it. And that's when Richard said, "Hey, let's stay connected and we'll get the community together. Can you do that?" So I said, sure. And, a few months later, after working and getting the community together, we had someone from California show us how to use this mini vol monitor system that works like a lung. And during that process, we had neighbors come to this training, volunteer their homes so that we can monitor. And what we did is we set this monitor outside for a 24-hour period, gathered information from the filters and sent them to the labs in Oregon. And going based off some studies, we saw that there were places where we monitored that would cause hospitalization if someone was outside for 3 hours during that time. So of course the air changes every day, but during those monitoring times we had some monitorings where they would be hospitalized. And then there were some that were so high that it could even cause death. And when we were bringing this up to the community, that's when people started to realize, hey, ever since I moved down here to Argentine, I have really bad asthma, I have respiratory issues, or I can't even smell anymore. Some people were just so used to the diesel that, they don't smell it anymore. I even had a friend who works for BNSF who said, I work for BNSF and I know my risk, but I would say that I would never live in Argentine. He said, it is so bad. He said, even if they gave me a house there, I would never live there. And, I in the area where it was the highest, this gentleman, his mother, once she retired, she started doing more yard work, and she got very ill and was hospitalized and eventually passed away. There was just people bringing up stories where they're more aware. We did have some challenges as well because a lot of the people in the community worked for BNSF. As Diane mentioned, Argentine, and then there's another neighborhood, Turner. We're right next to the second largest rail yard. We have more of the concentration was around the maintenance yard or the maintenance shop, but it spans all the way down through two major neighborhoods. But Turner wasn't very open to hearing us as much because they have a wonderful garden, but the grounds of that garden is BNSF land. They gave that land to these people. So when I asked them, when this is brand new, asked them if I would monitor, they were all for it. But then they realized, wait, we can't monitor here because BNSF gave us this land. We don't want to know. What's interesting enough, there was a gentleman next door to the garden. He said, hey, I want to know. I want to move out of here if I have to. Before I die, let me know if I need to move. And this guy's retired, and he was friends with everybody in that neighborhood. And unfortunately, he ended up passing away during this process of our monitoring. I think he had, other health issues, but, he walked around all the time, every day. And as I mentioned, a lot of people did work for BNSF. I would mention that my family actually, they came to the United States and settled in Kansas to work for the railroad. And so out of my 8 uncles or 8 brothers, 4 of them retired from BNSF. And unfortunately, one of my uncles just recently passed away within the last 2 weeks. He was exposed to all the diesel and asbestos. And, it's one of the things that we have to be able to just share with people, let them be aware so they can make their educated decision on what they can do regarding being outdoors during rush hour. Like maybe that's not a good idea. Even in the traffic when there's bad ozone days as well. So yeah, that's kind of where my story started on why, because I'm not a scientist. I'm just a concerned citizen, and I want to be able to share this with people. As I mentioned before, I did a lot through the nutrition side, but that was more individual and families, and the environmental side is something that I can do more for my community. And so, I'm still learning and seeing what else is there that I can do. And I know we did meet with BNSF. They're not really open into sharing stuff with us. They feel like there's not a lot that they're doing to damage or affect our health. We just got, I'm not too happy about it, but we just got a Walmart built in our neighborhood. And our commissioner says, wow, you know what? We bring the most money. And the pharmacies around here. And I'm like, doesn't that tell you something that people around here are sick? Like, why are you going to, do you realize you're bragging about people being sick? Like all of these medications. And so it just kills me because to me, you know, my goal is to improve quality of life and reduce illnesses.
Thank you. We now welcome Eric Kirkendall. Eric has been active in community organizing and environmental advocacy since the 1990s and is consultant to the Moving Forward Network, where we met Eric as well as Leticia. This is a national coalition dedicated to freight transportation, environmental health issues. He is co-founder, along with Richard Mabian, of the Diesel Health Project and founder of Clean Air Now, a Kansas City area regional clean air coalition. Eric, please tell us how you got involved in diesel exhaust health issues, and we'll learn more from you.
I was a federal employee and IT manager with NASA and then USDA when I moved to Kansas City. And my wife and I had our dream place, 4 acres in the country in a 1870s farmhouse and barns and all that good stuff. And a guy came knocking on the door one day, and it turned out he was a real estate agent wanting to buy our little 4 acres as a tiny piece of a huge warehouse complex. So I started fighting to save our home, and pretty quickly realized that the warehouse complex was being built to serve a new intermodal rail yard BNSF was planning on building. This is not the Argentine rail yard, it's a separate one. I was on the outskirts of the Kansas City metro area, and Leticia lives more in the middle. But the rail yard was on the other side of a little town from my home, Gardner. And as I researched it, I started working with folks out in California who I continue to work with as part of Moving Forward Network. But as I researched it, I realized, oh my God, the trucks from the rail yard are going to be coming right down Main Street past 3 schools and a rehab hospital on the way to the new warehouse they wanted to build. So I realized, well, my wife and I, we might win this battle, we might lose this battle. If we lose the battle, we have to sell and move away. But the kids in that town, they can't move away. So I started fighting more broadly to make the rail yard safer, hoping, honestly, they would move about 20 miles further out of the metro area where it would be much safer and affect far fewer people. And so I stayed involved. I know there's at least one Sierra Club member on the line. I'm also a Sierra Club member. So I've stayed involved. There was a lawsuit against the new rail yard filed by NRDC, and I helped on that, and they lost. And then at some point, it became clear that the new rail yard was going to generate a lot of pollution because it would cause another almost 40,000 additional truck trips in the Kansas City metro area. So there's no way that was not going to cause health problems. So that's when Richard Mabian and I hooked up. Argentine is maybe 40 miles from Gardner. And we decided to start monitoring at both locations. The monitoring Leticia was talking about around the Argentine rail yard is the one that set the alarm bells off. And I've been involved ever since.
Thank you. Why don't you tell us, in your view, the health impacts of diesel exhaust in general and from trucks as well as trains?
Okay. I have been following health news about diesel exhaust and roadway air pollution for closely for 5 years, and I am astonished on almost a weekly basis by the bad news coming out. Cars, as we all know, do produce a lot of pollution, but vehicles that burn diesel fuel are different. What comes out of the tailpipe of a diesel-powered locomotive or truck or anything else is a bunch of gases, but also particulate matter, little tiny chunks of carbon. And if you looked at one in a microscope, it would look like an asteroid. So these chunks of carbon have incredible surface areas. And on those chunks of carbon are 30 to 40 toxins, which of course you breathe in. If you're smelling diesel exhaust, you are breathing in those pieces of particulate matter with the toxins. And I cannot envision a more effective toxin delivery system than a piece of diesel particulate matter. If it's big, it'll get caught in your nose and it'll be expelled in due time. If it's smaller than that, a fine particulate matter, they call that, it can go into your lungs and then into your bloodstream where it circulates through your body with its toxins until it arrives somewhere and delivers them. If it's ultrafine, the very tiniest stuff, it's small enough to get through the blood-brain barrier and deliver the toxins to your brain. So, as you all are well aware, science is a kind of an iterative process. It took how many years to prove that smoking cigarettes caused lung cancer? A very long time. And the science about diesel is sort of in the same place. We know a World Health Organization has acknowledged diesel exhaust causes cancer. So it's a carcinogen. The science behind diesel exhaust as a causality for heart disease, very well accepted. Strokes in particular, but atherosclerosis and a whole host of other, high blood pressure, a whole host of other cardiovascular diseases, probably associated with inflammation caused by the toxins. Last but not least, there is a list that would choke a horse of health effects that are linked, strongly linked to diesel exhaust, though the causality has not been proven. First, in my mind, is the whole class of neurologic problems. Research in the last 2 or 3 years has found the more diesel particulate matter that people are exposed to, the higher their rates of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, ADD, all kinds of neurologic problems. It's also very strongly associated with reduced lung capacity in children, which shows up by, I might be wrong, but I think about age 10 with a 7% reduction, which you can live with. But at some point, as you might imagine, that 7% reduction is going to come back to haunt you when you need it, and it's not there. Autism, suicide, premature deaths, underdeveloped lungs, I've already mentioned, and a whole host of other diseases. So really, really scary stuff, much of it proven, much of it still in emerging science. And of course, locomotives and trucks are primary contributors to that. It might be worth mentioning very quickly that these health effects amount to a huge EJ issue. You can be in a city like Kansas City, which overall has pretty good air compared to Portland or Los Angeles. But if you are unlucky enough to live near a rail yard, to live within 400 meters of a freight highway, that's the people that are impacted by this. And for this call, I took a look to see what the statistics are for locomotives. Very interesting. Cars and trucks, taken together, the data just doesn't split them up, account for more deaths than dirty power plants, slightly more. Locomotives, about a tenth of that. Cars and trucks, about 53,000 premature deaths in the U.S. a year. Locomotives, about 5,500. And again, it's going to be in neighborhoods like Leticia's. I live in Lawrence, Kansas, by the way. At this point, I've moved because I had to get rid of my house, unfortunately. But it's those communities that are hit the hardest.
Thank you, Eric. I would like to know what is happening with the Moving Forward Network's Zero Emissions Now campaign. The
Zero Emissions campaign was very much an inside game. It wasn't a game, but it was an inside activity in the sense that rail yards and ports and freight transportation links are sort of the black hole of regulation. They're not regulated. EPA, rather than regulate the sites, the sources of the pollution, the way they would a power plant, they regulate the vehicles. This is on the basis of these being mobile sources. So, as you know, they regulate, EPA regulates how much pollution can come out of the tailpipe of your car or a truck or a locomotive. The problem is that rail yards and ports and even warehouse complexes are really points, pollution points. A rail yard can emit as much pollution as a power plant. So, and again, the neighborhoods around them are often in horribly unhealthy places with very reduced life expectancy.
My understanding then, if it's correct, is that rail yards aren't considered point sources of pollution.
Very true. Yes, very true.
But in fact, because of the cumulative impact of the trucks and the trains, like Leticia was speaking to, the servicing sheds, they ought to be considered a point source.
They should, and excellent point. In the Argentine rail yard in Kansas City, the locomotive maintenance facility is where they do load testing of locomotives, and there are often as 50 or more locomotives parked there, many idling. We can't tell quite how many are idling. We've tried to get a good count, but in the winter, I think it's quite a few of them. And those are 1,200 feet from homes. So yes, significant point sources, just not regulated. So, and I was taking the kind of long road around to answering the question. What we were trying to do with the zero emissions campaign was convince EPA they should be regulating these. They should be identifying their authority to do it and doing it. And we were making some significant progress until all of us here, I would expect, were disappointed by the results of an election that changed everything. So right now, the campaign still exists. We're still doing it. We're still providing public education. We're rethinking strategy. I think it's fair to say that at this point, Moving Forward Network has realized we're all fighting the same battle. Whether we're fighting for Solutionary Rail, or we're fighting to slow climate change, or whether we're fighting EJ or any number of issues, it's really all part of the same battle. So we're working hard on building more alliances and linkages.
Thank you, Eric. Could you tell us about the demands you made of BNSF that were featured in your video and what has happened? Leticia referred to them, the meetings, as not entirely successful. Could you tell us more, please?
Yes. First of all, I will tell you that we did not expect much to happen. We work closely with, of course, with other groups, and one of the groups and somebody with one of the groups in LA. I won't quote him or name him because he might not like it. I don't know, but he was told maybe 10 years ago by BNSF, we're not going to do anything we want unless we have to or it makes us money. Bang, that simple. So we didn't expect much action, and we got none. Our asks were to filter the pollution from the maintenance shop. Maintenance shop's a relatively small area, just a few acres. Technology exists to, and it's used on ships in LA, as many of you know, to capture the pollution and treat it on the spot. Could have been done, should be done. To monitor pollution at the fence line, to protect people in Argentine and Turner and the homes that Leticia monitored, to develop a plan to replace their locomotives with cleaner locomotives. Average locomotive, I can't speak authoritatively, but as I recall, last time I saw a list of locomotives operating in Argentina, some of them were from the mid-'60s. So locomotives stay in service a very, very long time. When they talk about clean locomotives, just remember there aren't that many of those operating. And the rail yards get the oldest and nastiest and dirtiest. And last but not least, something they completely failed to do very uniformly, which is keep the community informed.
Keep the community what, please?
Informed.
Informed.
Yes.
Well, Leticia, I want to circle back to you, and you came into the work in were good enough to share with us the deep purpose and tragedy that brought you into the work that you're doing now. Have you, through the work, met other people who've also had the experience of personal loss from the negligence of these corporations?
I think one of the things that I think about when there's a loss,
yeah,
I think there's a lot of, I don't know how to say it. Like, I don't want to blame one source all the time.
right.
Because I think it's a big part of the source, because I also think like there are some stuff that we can do, some self-responsibility things.
Right.
So I never have wanted to put the blame on anything or anyone. But I can't necessarily say that anybody has said it was because of the railroad that this loss happened.
Right.
I would say, for example, like my uncle, I mean, he's really close to me. We lived at the house I grew up till I was 12. We lived right across the street from each other, and he worked there, and he retired from there. And he was involved with the lawsuit regarding asbestos that he was exposed to. And then now, all of a sudden, within the last couple months, then he was diagnosed with liver cancer, and it spread to his lungs and all that. And that just happened so fast. And, it hits home really close. And not only that, but I think another thing is I feel like the NSF has mocked us. One of the things when we were doing our monitoring, I don't know if you're familiar with the Village Green Bench.
No.
So it's a bench that it was through EPA. I think only 5, and it could be more, but at the time, only 5 locations got selected to get this bench put in their neighborhoods. Well, since they saw that we were doing air monitoring, they reached out to us and said, hey, the EPA encouraged KDHE, the Kansas Department, I forgot now what it was, Eric, remind me, the KDHE, what does it stand for again?
Department of Health and Environment.
Oh, okay, yes. So they encouraged them to get this grant, to apply for this grant to get this village green. They're like, yeah, it's, from the Office of Research Development. It's this bench that will monitor your air, and you'll be able to pull up information online and this and that. So, they were talking big about it. And I know some of us were like, wait, this is a totally different monitor than what we're monitoring. We're monitoring ultrafine particles. This is monitoring the bigger particles, things that, as for example, like what Eric said, like you can cough it up. Like what we were monitoring, it actually isn't regulated. So it was going to be very contradicting. We put this monitor out there. Of course, it's going to say, oh, the air is not that bad. Right. That's exactly what happened. When we shared our results to the neighborhood, BNSF said, no, EPA put this monitor out in your neighborhood, and it's saying that the air is clean, it's good. And, we were hesitant about having that come into our neighborhood just because we thought, okay, they're going to use that against us, and they sure did.
Of course.
And, and then we had people that, are favorable to BNSF because they did give them money. So they were like, oh yeah, BNSF is doing everything to clean up. And so we have a lot of that also going on. So it's really hard to do things with them because that's the way they're taking it.
Uh-huh. Could either of you speak to when you hear about or think about this idea, the solutionary rail idea, the potential of electrifying, how does that intersect for you with the work that you're doing?
For me, I would definitely like to see that at least minimum start with the yard, the locomotives that stay in the yard, because those are the ones that stay on most of the time. And so I think that would be a great impact to reducing the pollution in our area. for them to see, okay, we're going to use this source. It's going to also clean the air. I think that'll be a great impact.
Okay, so there are certain locomotives that actually don't leave the yard. It's not just that they come in and they get maintenance. There's some that are in there helping.
Yes.
So those could be electrified, and that aspect of the operation could be decarbonized.
Right. Because it's considered a classification yard. So a lot of the trains that pass through there, they get there and they get separated. So, the ones that are pulling them through back and forth, because they do have 3 that are in the yard that, I don't remember how long ago, maybe 2014 or earlier.
Yeah.
They did get a grant where they retrofitted 3 locomotives. So they upgraded them, and one of the requirements was that they had to stay in the yard.
I see.
But that's just 3.
Right.
So there's a lot more work that could be done. And the thing is that they use their tax-paying dollars too.
Right. Yeah. Eric, any reflections for you in regards to specifically how might Solutionary Rail or the collaboration with Solutionary Rail impact your campaign?
Yeah, well, the linkages and parallels are pretty tremendous. Even one of the most promising technologies for trucks is concatenary power, electric power. This very similar to what you proposed for the Solutionary Rail, and in addition, for some ports, the Port of Los Angeles, ports of LA and Long Beach, a good example. A really very viable solution would be to move containers inland with rail, especially electric rail, rather than with trucks. Right now, LA is being choked by the trucks that are moving freight from the ports inland to where they're eventually put on trains. Yeah. So it's in many ways, from an EJ perspective, this is a last mile problem, or last 5 miles or 10 miles or whatever. It's the people that live in those near those transportation nodes that get hurt the most, and that could be helped the most by electrification. However, it's worth noting that this would have a huge positive impact on entire metro areas. City of Chicago. I think they say that the amount of pollution from locomotives in the city of Chicago is equivalent to 25 million cars. So it's a good solution, and of course, it's also one, in my view, that's very intersectional. I want to leave fossil fuel on the ground. So we start, of course, moving more vehicles with electricity. The logical next step is to think about how we're generating that electricity, and move to wind power and solar and all of those things. So I think it's a good solution.
Well, thanks. And the other piece that I think that came home for me from Leticia's comments earlier about not wanting to pin it, because there's so many different causes for cancers and et cetera, to pin it just on BNSF. I thought that was very generous of you, one, and but also it to me it was a reminder that there's not just one solution to our problems and the way this economy works. There are so many different ways that we sacrifice health and well-being and community in order to concentrate profit for a few. So I don't mean to twist your words, but I also wanted to just honor the complexity of what we participate in, and the very many probably health impacts, stresses, anxieties, and that impact our lives. The other thing that Eric, when you were speaking, it reminded me that if we had a freight system that didn't create concentrated hubs like Kansas City or Chicago, if the hubs were more spread out, if it was more polycentric rather than these large concentrations, that could have also potentially a profound impact on the local economy and health etc.